for a midget today. Okay, there we go. Welcome! Welcome back, everyone! Yes! I know! This is our 11th season back here at Joe's Pub, the place we love, and I urge you, even if you're on a diet, to try the French fries. They are the best in Manhattan, if not the 5 boroughs. Anyway, welcome everyone. I'm Amanda Foreman. This is Lucas Whitman. We are the co-founders of House of SpeakEasy. And exactly. And this is the first of our awesome literary cabaret, and tonight you are going to be wowed, you're going to be entertained, and indeed you may even be, on occasion, moved and provoked to serious but entertaining thought. Who are we? We are an educational and literary non-profit. What we are dedicated to is breaking down the barriers between books and readers and writers and audiences. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we're all here together and seriously entertaining. But we also do that with our Speak Together program in schools and our partners, New York Public Library, NYCHA, you name it. And that consists of workshops and storytelling and events. And how do we get there? Through our third program, which is the SpeakEasy Bookmobile. We have delivered over 25,000 free books throughout the 5 boroughs. I know. This summer, we've already been on 40 separate outings. And you know what? It's still only September. So there you go. Over to Lucas.
Thank you, Bill. So the show tonight, you're going to hear 4 amazing speakers, all around the theme of moments of clarity. And in the middle of those speakers, we're also going to have a quiz, which is when you all get to show just how clever you are. So without further ado, let's please welcome our first speaker of the night, Rebecca Davis. Rebecca is a professor of history at the University of Delaware, focusing on the history of marriage, religion, sexuality, and politics in the U.S. She's the producer of the Sexing History podcast, and her new book is Fierce Desires, A New History of Sex and Sexuality in America. Please welcome Rebecca Davis to the stage.
About 75 years ago, in 1948, a biologist at Indiana University published a book called Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. 5 years later, there was a follow-up study about women's sexual behavior in the human female. This was, of course, the work of Alfred Kinsey and his small research team. Kinsey had never set out to be a sex researcher. He was an entomologist. Prior to this, he studied the gall wasp, and he wanted to know everything about variation in the gall wasp species. So he became a sex researcher after he was asked to teach a new course on marriage. This wasn't that uncommon at American colleges and universities in the 1930s, usually taught by a faculty person from biology or sociology. Kinsey said sure, and he went about doing the research he would need for his lecture notes. And he was really appalled by what he found. He found psychiatric and psychoanalytic case studies of a single individual. He found questionnaires and surveys with completely unrepresentative samples. But even worse, he found all kinds of assumptions and moralizing baked in about when sex was normal and when it wasn't. And for Kinsey, this was a problem for 2 main reasons. One is just as a scientist, he didn't think you should presume what the results would tell you before you did the study. But also, Kinsey was himself queer, and he understood that sexuality wasn't always simply one simple thing. So he applied for a grant and was able to hire this small research team, and they decided to do what they believed to be the first scientific study of human sexual behavior. And they asked people questions one-on-one in interviews. And a Kinsey interview could last for hours and involved hundreds of questions about really specific sex acts and how old people were and how often and so on. And they were able to then, from these questions, get data, loads and loads of data, so that Kinsey could now know what % of Americans had had these experiences, differentiate by the decade of your birth, whether this person was living in a rural area, an urban area, education level, and so on. And the results really stunned Americans. More than a third of men in the study reported that they had had a sexual encounter with another man. Women were reporting rates of premarital and extramarital sex that far exceeded what the 1950s American woman was presumed to be having. And so the whole thing was just a sea change in the way that Americans thought about sexuality and the way that it was researched. So I have the privilege of teaching the history of sexuality in America, and I've been doing that for a long time. And there is so much research. I'm not facing anything like the problem Kinsey faced. There are books about anything you can think of, and more books coming out, more articles coming out all the time. I love to read it, and I love to talk about it with my students. So I've learned about fornication trials in early New England and indigenous rebellions against attempts to outlaw polygamy in the Southwest in the 1700s, and everything else you can think of up through the anti-vice crusades, censorship efforts, policing of queer people, changes to marriage, and so on. So 5 years ago, when I was given this opportunity to write a single volume history of sex and sexuality in America, I thought, sure. I mean, how hard could that be, right? I mean, I already know it, right? I've already read all the stuff, and I know how the story goes. And so I sat down and started writing everything I knew, sort of in a chronological sweep about the history of sex and sexuality in America. And it was really boring. It was, and when the point at which you've managed to make a book about sex very dull, you have to start over. And so my moment of clarity was figuring out that what I needed were stories. So the book that I've written is 18 chapters, and each chapter tells a different story. And it's been such a privilege to be able to tell stories about people like Thomasine Hall, who was raised in England to be a skilled seamstress, but then at some point in their late teens, changed their name to Thomas, put on a soldier's uniform, and fought for the English military in France, who then sailed as a soldier named Thomas to Virginia and worked as a female domestic servant named Thomasine on one of the tobacco plantations performing domestic labor, and who was brought before the highest authorities then present in the English settlements in Jamestown because there were disputes over what sex Thomasine was, which would bear on whether or not they could have potentially committed fornication, sex with an unmarried woman. I learned stories about people like Ida Craddock. Ida Craddock is the least known, most fascinating person, I think, in American history. She wanted to get a PhD, but Penn wouldn't admit her because she was a woman. She wanted to do a PhD in anthropology. So she went off and wrote it herself. She wrote a thesis on what she called phallic antiquities. She was really interested in the obelisk and in other phallic-shaped religious objects. So she also became a sex therapist and marriage counselor. And we're talking about this is like the 1890s. And she did this a lot by correspondence. People wrote to her with their problems, and she wrote back. And she based her authority as a sex therapist on the marriage she had to her spiritual husband, who lived in the world beyond, and whom she had never known in real life, but with whom she said she had fantastic sex. There are people in the book that I learned about, like Kiyoshi Kuramiya. And when Kiyoshi was a preteen, he found a copy of the Kinsey Report, the first one on sexual behavior in the human male, at a public library. And he says that he just read it cover to cover, because Kiyoshi had, by that point, already been arrested in a public park in Southern California for having sex with another boy. And for that, he was put in juvenile detention, and then he had to receive court-ordered testosterone injections. Not only that, but Kiyoshi had been born in 1943 at the Hart Mountain incarceration site in Wyoming to parents who were both Japanese-American citizens. And that combination of experiences made him a lifelong civil rights crusader, anti-war protester, and advocate for LGBTQ people and for education around HIV and AIDS. Truly amazing person. So I found all of these stories, and I thought about how important they are, not just as narrative devices. I mean, we all enjoy reading a good story, and I thought it was a good way to hold all of this information together without overwhelming the book. But I also found in writing about stories that so often sexuality is a story. We have stories we tell about our own sexuality. It's a way of telling who we are. Of course, the coming out narrative, which really starts in the 1970s with gay liberation, that says, come out of your closets and let the world know who you are and where you are. That is a story that people are telling. We also have stories that we tell about sexuality in relationship to our communities, explaining what our families believe or what our religious groups do or don't believe about sexuality and morality. Our politics tell stories about sexuality, and I think we are living through a really extraordinary moment in sexual storytelling at a national political level, whether it is abortion rights activists encouraging women to tell their abortion stories publicly as a way to raise awareness about how common abortion is, how safe it is, and how life-changing and saving it can be. We also are hearing lots of stories about other people, and this is, I think, one of the themes from my book is how often sexuality functions as a story that Americans have told about other people they wanted to disadvantage or set apart. And sexuality has served as, unfortunately, a very efficient way of saying who is normal and who is not, and therefore who is deserving and who is not. So I think about these stories. I thought about them as I was writing this book and as I was trying to figure out how to actually make it work. It was so much harder to write this book than I thought it would be, but I'm really inspired by the stories that I learned. Because one of the things that Kinsey discovered with all of this data he had was that variation was the norm. When you look at the vast range of human sexual behavior, you don't find a statistically normal center, let alone what Kinsey would have immediately dismissed as sort of a moralizing idea of sexual normalcy. But when I wrote my book, I also realized that my initial mistake was to write as if there was one central main plot line that would carry my reader from the beginning to the end. And instead, what I found were individual different stories that were each important for their own sake in telling this history, because I do think that when we look at the history of sexuality as well, we really need to pay attention to all the variation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our next speaker tonight is Iris Mwanza, who's a Zambian-American author, gender equality advocate, lawyer, and deputy director of the Gender Equality Division of the Gates Foundation. Iris serves on the supervisory board of CARE International and on the board of directors of the World Wildlife Fund, US. And to top it all off, she is also the author of the debut novel, The Lion's Den, which, in her own words, she says, I craft thrillers that are fast-paced and engrossing around important issues of identity, discrimination, law, religion, and power. Please welcome Iris to the stage.
Hello, everybody. How are you? I am not afraid of death. I'm not. My problem is dying. I am really, really scared of dying. The process of dying terrifies me. One might say it scares me to death. But I have to confront it. I have to confront it as a writer, and I have to confront it as a mortal. As a writer, I am a creator. I am the creator of my own world, so it's a little bit easier. I have some say in what happens. I say some because many of you probably know as well that the other person who has some say in a book is your editor. In books, death must be meaningful. If it doesn't have meaning, it shouldn't be in the book. And your editor will probably force you to take that out of your book. So in books, death can sound beautiful, even inviting. Toni Morrison in Song of Solomon wrote, "If you surrender to the air, you can ride it." Doesn't that want to make you die? Some have tried to make it funny. I saw a book that was entitled Exit Laughing, and it claims to take the sting out of death. I'm skeptical, so I haven't read it. But I respect all these other approaches. However, for me, I write it as I fear it. So death, for me in my book, is painful. It's leaky. It's smelly. It's a slow leaching away of life. I want it to sting. I want it to hurt. I want my readers to cry. I want to cry. I want to process my fears. Probably not doing a very good book, good job of selling my book right about now. But anyway, this is true. This is true. And I don't plan what happens to my characters. I don't even know from the beginning that they're going to die. I write my way into the story. So I don't have, some writers have those amazing, beautiful mosaics of ideas or incredible stylish setups in their offices. No, that's not me. I have three things: my heart, my head, and a few sticky notes. That's about it. But it works for me. It works for me. And when a character dies, I think really hard about what is this person, who I know doesn't really exist, but what did this person contribute to the world? What do they bring? How do they profoundly move or change things? You see, I write about very vulnerable people. These are not people who we know. I never write about people like Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa, but they are still heroic. They are heroic and they change the world in profound ways, yet they remain unnoticed, unknown, unloved. My ambition is that through the loss of this person that the reader has come to see, to know, to love through my brilliant writing, that they will take a moment, their eyes will open, they will start to think about their own biases, their own discriminatory practices, their own hatreds, or even just the disregard of vulnerable people. And my profoundest hope is that at the end of reading my book, they will try to do better in the world. In the real world, when death is sudden, there's no time for contemplation or moments of clarity, just regrets of those of us left behind. But where death is slow, there is a golden opportunity. There's a golden opportunity to contemplate, to have moments of clarity, to really, really confront some of our fears, at least my fears. In the real world, I'll tell you, my mother is dying. It's okay, it's okay. She's been dying for 12 years. So in 2012, this is true, 2012 she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And she was told that she had a slim chance of survival and pretty much she should get her affairs in order. And so she told me that she looked it up and the internet said 8%. And she said, I'm in that 8%. And she's been refusing to die ever since. And if you know my mother, this is not surprising at all. So I decided maybe I should ask my mom, who is something of an expert now, what she has learned. Interestingly enough, this was the first time we've ever had a conversation about death or dying, even though I was there at that fateful colonoscopy, which started this very long journey for her and for us as her family. So I asked her, would she share the wisdom of 12 years of dying? And I was so surprised when she agreed. You see, my mom is German, very German, very, very German, despite living in Zambia for 60 years. And what this means is my mom despises anything touchy-feely. She doesn't want to talk about any type of feeling. anytime you broach a subject that is sort of in that, even vaguely, my mom has one refrain which rebuffs all further attempts. "Ah, you've become so American." And that's the end of the conversation. So I really thought she would refuse, but she didn't. And here is a distillation of how that conversation went. Mom, now that you're an expert in dying, what can you share with the world? Well, when Herr Professor Schmidt told me that I was pretty much a goner, German doctors don't sugarcoat things, I thought to myself, how do I want to spend the rest of my days? And every day I think about, what do I have to look forward to? Whether it's a small thing, like eating a piece of cake, or a big thing like my 85th birthday. My mom's going to turn 85 in November. But I don't waste time. It's self-pity. Self-pity is negative thinking, and negative thinking is the beginning of a death spiral. So channeling my own fears, I asked her, Mom, are you afraid of dying? No, I'm not afraid. Maybe when the time comes, I'll change my mind. But people who have come back from the dead speak of this beautiful, beautiful light, dazzling light, and marching through this tunnel, and they know in their heart of hearts that they are walking towards heaven, or whatever their belief system tells them is waiting for them. But that is just the brain shutting down. My mom is an atheist, by the way. My mom is a staunch atheist, if that exists. So we become nothing. This is my mom still talking. We become nothing, and our bodies become dust to dust. Speaking of, I told your dad that I want to be cremated, and my ashes scattered in the vegetable garden. My dad says that I'm being ridiculous, but that's what I want. What do you think? I told her that I was inclined to agree with my dad, but only because nobody would want to eat the lettuce. She said, now I'm the one being ridiculous, by which at that time my dad piped in rather unhelpfully, and he said, if he outlives my mom, he's going to bury her like a normal person. So I edited out the argument that ensued. And after several attempts, I was able to get my mom's attention again. So Mom, now we can get back to the issue at hand, the secrets of beating the odds. Yeah, it hasn't been easy. Chemo isn't like eating sweeties. So you must decide for yourself what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. Avoid snake oil. Avoid witch doctors. Avoid people who will give you false hope. But also be skeptical of doctors who tell you that you're done. Last year, the doctors told my mom yet again that this was her last year, and she said, they keep telling me I won't be here, I wouldn't be here today, and she's planning her 85th birthday, yet here I am still. So surround yourself with friends, surround yourself with family, have a good support system, and stay busy. Staying busy keeps me alive and well and fighting fit. I have fun, she said. I have fun annoying my children. It keeps me going. As long as I'm annoying you, then I know it's not time yet. I assured her that she was still very annoying. We talked more about death, but not in the way I had always thought about it or wanted to write about it, which was about legacy or contributions to the world or bending the arc of history. But what I found was her matter-of-fact attitude did help assuage some of my fears around dying. I'm still afraid. I'm still afraid for her. I'm still afraid for myself and all the people that I love. But now I feel like as a writer, I can be more creative. I can be more poetic. Maybe I can even be more funny about death. As for our lives in the real world, from the lips of Ilse Mwanza to you, her advice is simple and practical. Be stubbornly positive. Take medicine and avoid snake oil. Find things big and small to look forward to. Surround yourself with friends and family, and have fun as you define it. So I hope you find helpful her instruction for dying, which occurs to me is the same instruction for living. So thank you, Mom. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Iris. And now we've come to the point in the evening, tip of my tongue, when we give you 3 passages. Could be from a poem, it could be a song lyrics, it could be a novel. If you got to guess what those passages, the name of the work, and the name of the author of the work. No phones, no Google, no ChatGPT. All right, everyone? We're here in this room, just using your own mind. And tonight, to read our quiz, we have the wonderful Ariana Cipriani, who is the Programming and Marketing Director for the Hudson Yards Hell's Kitchen Alliance, a nonprofit business improvement district, and the host of the Bella Abzug Park, where the House of SpeakEasy bookmobile was several times over the last few months. Please welcome Ariana. Oh, and the winner of the quiz walks home with signed books by all of our speakers tonight. And we're going to have a little brief intermission after this, and during the intermission, people will be circulating, and you can give them your answer sheets, okay? No questions? You're ready? Okay, please welcome Ariana to the stage.
All right, quote number 1. Peter was not quite like other boys, but he was afraid at last. A tremor ran through him like a shudder passing over the sea, but on the sea follows another until there are hundreds of them, and Peter just felt the one. Next moment, he was standing erect on the rock again, with that smile on his face and the drum beating within him. It was saying, to die will be an awfully big adventure. Quote number 2. Walking along a path I carved myself, one I hoped was the PCT, was the opposite of using heroin. The trigger I'd pulled in stepping into the snow made me more alive to my senses than ever. Uncertain as I was as I pushed forward, I felt right in my pushing, as if the effort itself meant something, that perhaps being amidst the undesecrated beauty of the wilderness meant I too could be undesecrated, regardless of what I lost or what had been taken from me, regardless of the regrettable things I'd done to others or myself, or the regrettable things that had been done to me. And quote number 3. Aureliano saw the epigraph of the parchments perfectly paced in the order of man's time and space. The first of the line is tied to a tree, and the last is being eaten by the ants. Melchiades had not put events in the order of a man's conventional time, but had concentrated a century of daily episodes in such a way that they coexisted in one instant. Good luck.
right, so for those of you who had some trouble getting all of the answers this evening, yes, do you know what? So did I. So you were not alone. But one of you out there is a genius, and that genius will be revealed at the end of the show. So yes, I know. I can't wait to find out. Who is that person? I am married, but you know, I do have 4 daughters, or if you're, and I have 1 son actually. So they're all available and delightful. Yes, or you can have all of them, pile them high, and sell them cheap. Anyway, you know what? We're open to all offers. Now, in the meantime, we are back, and we have our 3rd speaker. And what is so exciting about this particular speaker is that we don't often have songwriters on stage here. We recognize novelists, journalists, scriptwriters, and yet the lyricist, the person behind the words that we sing along to, we often forget. And so it is an amazing privilege and joy to be able to welcome to this stage one of my favorite lyricists, Ricky Ian Gordon. I know he's a leading writer of vocal music. It's art, it's song, it's opera, it's his musical work, it's so many, I have to read it off. It's Orpheus and Eurydice, it's Green Sneakers for baritone, it's The Grapes of Wrath, it's Intimate Apparel, he's written for Audra McDonald, Christian Chenoweth, Judy Collins, Renee Fleming. But this is the man that makes their voices literally sing through the words. And he's here because he's also published a memoir. It's called Seeing Through, a chronicle of sex, drugs, and opera. And so this is Ricky in his own words. He says, my inspiration comes from my own life. Oh my God. Okay. My inspiration comes from my own life, the desire to be known, the desire to create beauty, the desire to create meaning. Writing both music and words serves as a container for all that I think and feel, however capricious or even limited that may be. And I can assure you one thing he ain't is limited. Ladies and gentlemen, exactly, Ricky Ian Gordon, woo!
Hello. I just want to tell you really quickly that if tonight there is a full moon and a lunar eclipse, and I read in Susan Miller's Astrology Zone today that what is highlighted are moments of clarity. So I'm going to tell you that. So I'm going to I actually have a little title for my talk, and it's The Power of Myth and the Power of Poetry. And then when I was sitting at the bar listening to this wonderful ladies beforehand, I was thinking of, do you know that when Stravinsky wrote The Rite of Spring, Le Sacre du Printemps, he said, I am the vessel through which passed Le Sacre. And that's sort of apt for what I'm going to talk about. In 1995, I got a call from a young clarinetist. His name was Todd Palmer. And I knew him. He had been coming to all my concerts. I really liked him, and he played beautifully. He was a young concert artist winner. And he asked me if I would write a piece for him. He had been touring the country with Kathleen Battle, the great African-American soprano, and they were doing The Shepherd on the Rock, which is Schubert's last, his penultimate piece from 1828, and it's stunning piece for piano, soprano, and clarinet. And so he wanted a companion piece for that. And it was a very stressful time in my life because I was, at the time, my partner, Jeffrey, had AIDS, and we were in a difficult passage. So really, I probably shouldn't have said yes at all, but I'm a composer, so I always need the money. So I said yes. And so first I said, Todd, let me think about what the text is going to be. Like, let me look for a poem. And I looked for a poem and nothing came of it, and mostly I was procrastinating anyway. So we met, and I said, I think I'm going to write the text. And then we met a few weeks later, and I was like, I don't really have anything. And then we met again, and this time I was so stressed out, and I said, Todd, I think all I can do is write you something for clarinet and piano. I don't have it in me right now. But then he had given me the money, and he was so pissed at me. He was just like, whatever. So that night, I went to sleep, and this is the moment of clarity and the power of myth. I went to sleep, and Jeffrey and I were sleeping in the same bed, and at 4 a.m., I awakened, and I had a dream. And in the dream, it was the entire Orpheus and Eurydice myth in my head, but Todd was Orpheus. And Todd was a very attractive young man. He had been a figure skater. And so I even saw how he was dressed. He was dressed in one of those blue and white Apache T-shirts, those French T-shirts. And I saw that Eurydice was in yellow. Anyway, I got up, I went to the dining room table, and I wrote down, Orpheus played his pipe, music like a cool blue stripe circling the heavens. Within an hour, I had the entire libretto for this opera. And I knew that I was going to have to tell Todd, thank you. But the really interesting thing, and by the way, I knew it's not going to be 10 minutes, but the really interesting thing is that the arc of the piece is in 2 acts. The first act is about the birth of love. That act ends with Orpheus singing to Eurydice, with you, my heart begins to know the way in which the world I see is me, and I am it somehow. I am part of something now. And then Act 2 opens, and in Act 2, Eurydice has become ill. And by the end of the piece, so the whole first part of the second act is about her illness and then her death and grief. And it ends with rebirth. So the last lines of the opera are, where spirit sets the soul to rise, the barrenness of winter skies, the vibrancy of summers, their music lies, O sound unearthly, Orpheus has birthed thee. So it's all about the birth of love and then the birth of art through suffering. But here's the weird thing. The story of the shepherd and the rock. It begins with the shepherd is on the rock singing about the echoes from the valley below. And it's all about joy. And then she sings, then the next part is about grief and loneliness. And the last part is about rebirth. So the weird part of that, not only that I sort of wrote my own 75-minute, Shepherd on the Rock, but that myth at that moment in my life came to me because I needed to tell the story of what was happening to Jeffrey and I, and that entire piece came to me. And when, as you know, when someone is dying from AIDS, they die incrementally, and every day there's less of them. And there's a line in that piece, Orpheus says, as she slept, he wept bitterly and dearly, growing more and more bereft as in increments she left. And so that is that part of the story is for me about a myth coming to me out of nowhere to allow me to tell the story of what was happening to me. And then we premiered at Lincoln Center in 2005 and won the Obie Award. So, yay, okay. Now, I have to make sure I stay within 10 minutes. So the next part of the story is August 1st, 1996, Jeffrey died. Obviously, I was completely, it's as if I never knew the meaning of the word grief, and suddenly I was in a foreign country and no one spoke my language. I had a friend named Michael Klein, a poet. Sebastian has read with him. And Michael said, she talks like this. He said, you have to read Mark Doty's Heaven's Coast, which was a poet. Mark Doty wrote a memoir of grief about his lover Wally dying. I read this book. I found Mark Doty's telephone number. I called his home in Provincetown. Anyway, basically I said, you have to be my friend. And I'm coming to Provincetown. So, because the way I felt was, I need to be where poets are. No one in my world, I felt like no one was speaking the language of grief, and I was so decimated. I needed to be around poets, and that was a moment of clarity. So I went to Provincetown, and one day I did, after my morning AA meeting, I went and found Mark in front of his little house at 19 Pearl Street, and just like in the book, he was doing his roses. He had the most incredible garden. And we became friends for that summer. And his lover at the time was Paul Lisicki, who's a great writer. And I'm actually going to be his interlocutor at the Center for Fiction with his new Joni Mitchell book. But the way I want to end my talk is, so I met all these poets, and I felt like my life was changed by them. One of those poets, one day I walked into a bookstore, and I read a poem by a woman named Marie Howe. And the poem was called What the Living Do. And I froze in that bookstore. It was as if I needed to insert that poem inside of me in order to get through the rest of my life. So I really just want to finish by saying that poem to you. So Marie wrote What the Living Do after her brother Johnny died of AIDS. It took 8 years. One of the reviews said, there aren't words for a book this beautiful. And this is the penultimate poem in the book. Johnny, the kitchen sink has been clogged for days. Some utensil probably fell down there. And the Drano won't work, but smells dangerous. And the crusty dishes have piled up, waiting for the plumber I still haven't called. This is the everyday we spoke of. It's winter again. The sky's a deep, headstrong blue, and the sunlight pours through the open living room window because the heat's on too high in here and I can't turn it off. For weeks now, driving or dropping a bag of groceries in the street, the bag breaking, I've been thinking, this is what the living do. And yesterday, hurrying along those wobbly bricks in the Cambridge sidewalk, spilling my coffee down my wrist and sleeve, I thought it again, and again later while buying a hairbrush. This is it. Parking, slamming the car door shut in the cold. What you called that yearning. What you finally gave up. We want the spring to come and the winter to pass. We want whoever to call or not call, a letter, a kiss. We want more and more and then more of it. But there are moments walking when I catch a glimpse of myself in the window glass, say the window of the corner video store, and I'm gripped with a cherishing so deep for my own blowing hair, chapped face, and unbuttoned coat that I'm speechless. I am living. I remember you. Thank you.
I know. Can we just hear it one more time for Ricky? I'm just going to add a quick coda to that, which is, what is the definition of immortality? I'll give you one definition. What is Ricky doing? He is giving a spoken word performance that is also a song. It is also a poem, and it references the rock. And where does that come from? It comes from Crete, from the ancient Minoans. They were the very first to stand on the rock and to sing and to chant and to create the kind of lyric prayers that ultimately became the inspiration for Sappho and for every other lyric poet and playwright that came afterwards. And why does that matter? Because we don't know who they were. The name Minoan is not their name. They left nothing of themselves except the form of their poetry, and therefore they are immortal. And Ricky is a part of that immortality. Now, so our final speaker this evening has been, hang on a second, hang on, hold your horses. He has been to the very top of the world. He has been to the very bottom of the world. He has faced dangers. He has braved jungles and war zones. He has traveled thousands of miles. And today, he traveled for 15 minutes to get to us, indeed. I'm talking about Sebastian Junger, and I'm not going to say everything that he has written, but to remind you, he's the author of Tribe, War, Freedom, A Death in Belmont, Fire, and The Perfect Storm, but most recently, his latest book is In My Time of Dying, How I Came Face to Face with the Idea of an Afterlife. You see how our producer ties it all together. Indeed, Sebastian, he's won a Peabody Award. He was co-director of the Academy Award-winning nominated documentary Restrepo. But this is what, this is how he sums himself up. And it is pithy. He says, I strive for maximum clarity, directness, simplicity, and originality. Ladies and gentlemen, Sebastian Junger. Woo!
Hi there, everybody. What a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I was a war reporter for a long time, many years. And as a result, I always thought that death was dramatic and happened somewhere else. I was blown up by a roadside bomb. I survived because the guy with the clacker that blew us up did it a moment too soon. I had bullets hit next to my head into sandbags and kicked sand in the side of my face, maybe an inch or two away. I think my worst moment, my loneliest moment, I was seized by rebels in the Niger Delta, these Ijaw warriors, and they accused me of being a spy. And one of them came up to me. He was carrying a belt-fed machine gun, very intimidating-looking guy, and he said, when we kill you later, I'll be the one to do it. I eventually got out of the business after my dear friend and brother and colleague Tim Hetherington was killed in Libya. He bled out from a shrapnel wound from a mortar. I gave it up. I got married. I had children. The most amazing thing in the world happened to me. I had a family with someone I love. And then I found out that death could be quite casual as well. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It was a few years ago, during COVID, we were living in Massachusetts. We had a place at the end of a dead-end dirt road, very remote old house in the woods, no cell phone service. The landlines didn't work when it rained because they shorted out. It was paradise, basically. And one day we had a little babysitting from some teenage girls up the road. And I had built a cabin even deeper in the woods that had just oil lamps and a wood stove. And my wife and I, Barbara and I, went out to the cabin while the babysitters were taking care of the little girls, the 6 months old and 3 years old, to the most beautiful place in the world, basically. And we're out there at this cabin, and this is how death happens as well. In mid-sentence, I felt pain shoot through my abdomen. It doubled me over. And trying to work it out, I stood up and tried to walk around, and I collapsed. And I said words that I never thought I'd have to say. I said, I think I'm going to need some help. So what I didn't know was that I had an undiagnosed aneurysm in my pancreatic artery. An aneurysm is an unnatural ballooning of the wall of an artery. It's a freak thing. What I had was extremely rare. And they will grow for years, decades, your whole life. And then they will get to a critical point and they'll rupture. And if that happens, you will probably die. If you're stabbed in the stomach, you're doing well, because A, you know what the problem is, there's blood all over the floor, and B, the doctors know where to put their finger to plug the leak, but not with internal hemorrhage, not with a ruptured aneurysm in your abdomen. I was losing maybe a pint of blood every 10 minutes. You can lose 5 or 6 pints of blood before you die. And we lived an hour from the hospital. You can do the math. I was literally a human hourglass. So Barbara got her arm around my waist, and I got my arm over her shoulder, and she dragged me out of the woods and put me in the passenger seat of the car and ran in and told the babysitters, like, try to get a cell phone signal. The lines weren't working. Try to get a cell phone signal. One of the girls got 1 bar of signal and called the ambulance, and Barbara came back out to where I was, and she watched me going in and out of consciousness, and every time I went out of consciousness, she thought that might be it. He might not come back. Finally, the ambulance got there, and we started out on the drive, the 1-hour drive, and I'd gone into something called compensatory shock, where your body kind of rallies for a while. It clenches down on everything. It hoards this precious blood in your chest, in your brain, and you can only do that for so long. And I held it together, and right when we got to the hospital, I went off a cliff. I felt it happen. My blood pressure was 60/40. I was in end-stage hemorrhagic shock. I was convulsing. I was deep in hypothermia. And I had no idea I was dying. None. I was not of right mind. I wasn't thinking clearly. I'm just in for belly pain. Why are there 12 people around me? What is going on? I was very confused. They rushed me into the trauma bay. And suddenly there was a doctor with a big needle, and he came up to me and he said, I'm going to put this through your neck into your jugular, and we're going to transfuse you. And I said, you mean in case there's an emergency? That's how much I did not get it. And so they're working on my neck, and I just have to stop here and say, I'm an atheist. I like to think I'm a rationalist. I'm definitely not a mystic, and I'm not spiritual. My father, who passed away 12 years ago, was a physicist and an atheist. You need to know that because of what I'm about to say. A black pit opened up underneath me. It was a kind of portal to infinity. It was infinitely black, infinitely huge, and I didn't know I was dying, but I was like a wounded animal. I was like a gut-shot coyote. I knew that if I went into the pit, I wasn't coming back out. And I got terrified because I was getting pulled in. And suddenly above me, I saw my father, my dead father, in this incredible energy form. And he said, he communicated to me, it's okay. You don't have to fight it. You can come with me. I'll take care of you. My father was, I think the phrase is, on the spectrum. He was a physicist. He was very hard to reach emotionally when I was young. But there he was when I really needed him. He was all the way there. It's okay, come with me. I was horrified. Like, go with you, you're dead. The party is over here, right? We'll talk later, a lot later, but I'm just in for belly pain. You got completely the wrong idea. And then I said to the doctor, because I'm still conscious, I'm still conversant, I said to the doctor, you got to hurry. I'm going. You're losing me right now. They stabilized me. They rushed me into the interventional radiology suite, where they put you on a fluoroscope that does real-time X-ray, and then they use a catheter to navigate your venous system while watching you on the X-ray. I was on that fluoroscope for so long that I got radiation burns on my back. 2 weeks later, they came out. I had like a square sunburn on the back of my back from the metal plate that I was lying on. My wife, Barbara, was not psyched, and I tried to cheer her up a little bit by saying, that's okay, we can call it Square Noble. And she, a completely failed bit of humor. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't save me. And I remember, I wasn't sedated. They didn't dare. My vital signs were too low. And I looked up, I heard the doctors talking about me, and one of them said, we tried. We did everything we could. And the other guy was like, yeah. The alternative to interventional radiology is they send you into the OR and they cut open your abdomen and they start looking for the bleed before you bleed out. They told me this later. And had they done that, they would have called Barbara in to say goodbye. They wouldn't have told her that, but they would have brought her in to see me one last time. And then one of the doctors said, why don't we try going through his left wrist instead of through his groin? And the other guy said, I like the way you think. That's how they saved me. And I should say, unless I sound mocking or unappreciative, the guy who saved my life is one of the best interventional radiologists in the country, Dr. Phil Dombrowski. I am alive because of him. My daughters have a father. My wife has a husband because of that man. I'm deeply grateful. It was a shocking moment, though, and that was when I realized, whoa, I might die. I might die. I might not go home. I might never see my children again or my wife. I'm going to die under very bright lights, surrounded by strangers wearing surgical masks, and that's just how it is. I woke up in the ICU. I came out of this vast darkness to the sound of a very intense Boston accent. A ICU nurse, middle-aged, looked like she'd buried 3 husbands, tough as nails, heart of gold, you know the type, right? And I opened my eyes and she said, congratulations, Mr. Junger. You almost died last night. It's a miracle you're alive. No one can believe you made it. I was shocked. I had no idea, absolutely no idea. And then suddenly I remembered the pit, my father. What did I see last night? What was that? What was I given a glimpse of? The woman left, came back an hour later and said, how you doing? And I said, well, after what you told me, not so great. Like, I mean, it's terrifying. And she said, try this. Instead of thinking about it like something scary, try thinking about it like something sacred. And then she walked out. The homecoming was complicated. Like coming home from war is complicated. It should be the best thing ever, so why are you sobbing? You know, why do you feel like you don't deserve to be there? I came home. Barbara picked me up. We drove up the dirt road to our house. All the trees were hung with drawings from my girls. We love you, Daddy. Come home, Daddy. We miss you. You know, I was a mess by the time I got out of the car. And I hugged them, and then the problem started. I was experiencing something that apparently is quite common, I didn't know about. It's a classic effect of trauma. Derealization. I didn't think I existed. I thought maybe I died. I thought maybe that I actually had died at the hospital. I saw my father, and everything else after that was a dying hallucination, and I'm not really here, and no one can see me. I think they can, but they can't. They're mourning me. My little girls, my friends, my wife. I finally went up to Barbara, and I was really sort of descending into madness. And I went up to Barbara, and I sort of grabbed her by the shoulders, like, tell me I'm really here. Just, like, tell me I made it. And she said, yes, of course you made it, sweetheart. You're right here. We love you, et cetera, et cetera. In my mind, I'm thinking, that's exactly the kind of thing a hallucination would tell you. And then she said this brilliant thing. She said, do you feel like you were lucky or lucky to have this happen to you? I mean, not that I survived, of course I was lucky, but if you could push a button and just make it not happen, would you push the button? And I didn't know how to answer. I'd been to the ultimate front line, I realized. I'd gone to the edge of the abyss. I looked over, and I was allowed to come back. I saw the secrets. I saw the mystery. right? And I came back, and now this knowledge, death, was perched on my shoulder like some ghastly raven. You know, it was always there. Everything I did, this bird was on my shoulder reminding me of what almost happened and what will happen. And then I sort of realized that terror and reverence are two sides of the same coin. If you're not sufficiently terrified, you're not going to be sufficiently reverent of the miracle of life. You don't have to be religious to consider it a miracle. And if you're not sufficiently focused on the miracle of life, not just in its grand form, but in its days, in its moments, you're not going to be sufficiently terrified. They go together. And I finally, in my sort of nerdy journalist way, I thought, etymology will save me. Really what Barbara was saying is, do you feel blessed or cursed? And so I thought, I'm going to look up the origin of the word blessing, see what it says. Maybe there's a path out of my state of mind with a little bit more knowledge. And indeed, it's derived from the Anglo-Saxon word bletzian, which means blood. The idea being that there is no blessing without a wounding, without a sacrifice. They're twinned. You don't get one or the other. You don't have to decide if you're blessed or cursed, because you can never be. It's always both. I would exempt anything bad happening to young children from that. I won't allow that there's a blessing in that. But everything else that happens to you is both. I'm still an atheist. Sometimes people ask me if my experience changed my relationship with death. Am I more at ease with it? Am I comfortable? You know, will this help later? It didn't really. It was terrifying. But this is what helped. The wisdom of children, like they're blank slates. They see the world as it is. If only we could get back to what they see, the way they understand things. My oldest daughter, I'd explained to her about the earth as a sphere and the sun, and a few days later, she came up to me and she said, "Daddy, I know why there's night." I said, "Why, sweetheart?" She said, "So that other people can have day. Well, I know why we die. So that other people can live. There simply isn't room to keep all of us here." And in that sense, for me now, because of what my daughter said, I realize it's an honor. Not only is it a requirement and a duty, but it's an honor and a privilege to perform this final act of love. And that is to leave this beautiful planet so that our children can enjoy it as we did. Thank you so very much for the chance to talk to you. Thanks.
The world is indeed a beautiful place. So, the answers to the quiz. Yes, okay. Number 1, Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. Tinkerbell, exactly. Okay, number two. Wild by Cheryl Strayed. Yes, well, congratulations. And finally, 100 Years of Solitude. Oh, The Geniuses by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And so we do have a genius in the house. This genius, I know you don't want to marry any of my kids, but they would really love to intern for you. I just want to say that. And the name actually does matter. It really does, and I'll tell you why in a second. It is Gina Chung. Congratulations, Gina. Yes. And why does it matter so much that it was Gina Chung who won? I'll tell you why. Because next month's show on the 22nd of October, the theme is Be Not Afraid. Maybe you should be, but that's the theme, Be Not Afraid. And it features Clara Bingham, Jeremy Dauber, Jive Poetic, and Gina Chung. Woohoo!
That's our show for you tonight. A big round of applause to all of our amazing speakers. They will all be outside signing books at the end. Please buy their books, support their work. Thank you all for coming out tonight. You've been a great, great audience. We'll see you October 22nd back here on this stage. Which one? Yeah. Thank you all. Good night.